Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Fulham. We are back to preview the Nottingham Forest game, coming off the back of a very good result against Newcastle, the 3-1 victory. And here to talk it all through, we have Skibby. How are we going? Welcome back.
I'm all good, thank you very much. Still beaming from the weekend. I mean, I like to say it's rare that we get a performance like that, which just leaves you smiling the whole time. But yeah, and it's pleased, but there's always a pinch of salt that the Arsenal fans are still in my ear. Smith Rowe, Nelson, I'm like, yeah, I get it. Arsenal B team was the one that came up in the chat the other day, and I'm not happy about it. But other than that, I'm letting it slide. Fulham are flying. I'm loving it.
Arsenal B team, despite the results from last season. But anyway,
Well,
good to have you, Skibby. And Dave, welcome. Well, I was going to say welcome back, but what I really mean is you can take a back seat today and just kick your feet up, enjoy it, relax a little bit. Thank you for taking over the podcast for the last couple of weeks or so.
Well, welcome back to you, Jack. It's been a few pods since you've been on. So, back where I belong, on the sidelines. I'll try and do the old job properly. I think the listeners will be very thankful to have your lovely Australian voice back in the hot seat.
No, I appreciate it, Dave. And look, let's get straight into it. But as always, just a reminder that you can get all the information on everything Fulham on the That's So Craven Discord. Anytime you want to, it's there for all sorts of information. There's loads of transfer news going through at the moment as well, actually. Surprising links with Callum Wilson, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit later. And yeah, a really good place, especially on match day, if you're looking for like-minded Fulham fans to talk all things Fulham about. There's also links for tickets in there. There's all sorts of information. So please do join the Discord. You can find all the links in our bio. We also have cravenpod.com where we post up regular articles, previewing games, reviewing games, giving you all the latest news from everything Fulham. Guys, let's just wrap out last week before we move on to the Forest game. Skibby, I'll throw to you first as you haven't had a chance to be on any of the pods recently to talk about this Newcastle game. How are we feeling post-match? You touched on it a little bit in the very start, but now that it's been a few days, just to sort of let it all sink in, how do you feel Fulham are looking after that Newcastle game?
I mean, for me, I think I touched upon it in previous pods that there is this discontent, there is this kind of feeling about the middle of the park, but I think what I said previously was as long as I see bits of progress every time, for me it's starting to come together. And I listen to the pod. You're all slamming my boy Andreas. I don't like it, but no, do you know what? I get it and I see it, and I still have that kind of feeling of that you could have done better there. That's not quite as great. But there's that element of progress, and the fact that I'm still seeing the progress, I'm still seeing bits happen there, I think it's quite exciting. And I think for me, the one that really hits the nail on the head about the middle of the park was the Smith Rowe goal. Andreas comes... Andreas. See, I'm just obsessed with him. Adama comes inside, and, they're bombing forward. Andreas is coming round the back. He's sort of gone more wide, and we just crash the box. And, Smith Rowe picks up a great position. If Pope saves it, it's either falling to Adama or Andreas's feet. And, that is, for me, that bonus of having someone like that being progressive in the middle. But, yeah, it's coming together. Now you've got Berger coming in. He's getting up to speed. He's banging on the door. We've got a really good squad. And you can't help but feel really good about it. And Newcastle is a big win. It's a really big win. I mean, I think they could have gone top. I mean, very early in the season, but they could have gone top this weekend if they beat us, and we just didn't let them play at all. Kind of mishaps in the beginning of the second half, but yeah, for me it was a great result, and for us to be pushing on where we are with sort of 8 points, I would take that. I think we're moving in the right direction. There's been a lot of transition. Obviously, we talked about Palhinha, and I feel really good. There's something really buzzing about this squad, and it's all key to Marco, but it feels pretty good.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, you look at it and, this Newcastle team, they'd conceded 3 goals in their first 4 games. They've now conceded 6. They were unbeaten coming into the game against Fulham. Like you said, they would have gone It would have been second on goal difference behind Man City, to be fair, but would have been top on Saturday night for sure. Uh, like, I think at the start of the year, for the first couple of games, we were always saying that it just wasn't clicking, and I think it really is starting to click now. The players are starting to understand each other. Some of the new additions, like Smith Rowe, is getting in the right positions now. Um, Anderson being in the team is making such a massive difference. And like you said, the fact that you've got Sander Berger coming off the bench and knocking on the door, Reece Nelson will now be knocking on the door as well. And he's got 2 goals in his past 2 games and some really good performances as well. I think it is starting to come together. And now I actually was going to mention that I feel like we've maybe been a little harsh on Fulham so far this season. Admittedly, before the weekend, we maybe hadn't got as many points as we could have done, but a late slip up against Man United, a disappointing slip up against West Ham. If we'd held on, that's an extra 3 points. We'd be sitting on 11 points and currently in 4th place, ahead of Arsenal, Chelsea, Newcastle. It would actually be a really great season so far if we'd hold on to those. But as it is, we've had a couple of little slip ups, but we're still sitting pretty at the moment. And look, a win against Nottingham Forest this weekend definitely puts us in the mix for those European spots. And admittedly, we're probably going to lose to Man City the week after, but it does mean if we win against Nottingham Forest, we'll have 11 points from 7 games going into the next international break. When you're trying to aim for that sort of point per game average across the whole season, that's a really good start, especially considering we've already had to play Man City and Man United early doors. So, Dave, I'll let you have a final word on the Newcastle game as well. Obviously, you've covered it already, but yeah, your thoughts now. It's been a couple of days to just sort of let that one settle. You're on mute.
Apologies. I'm still buzzing about it, Jack. I think I'm delighted to have 8 points on the board after 5 games. I think it puts us in a really good position ahead of a tricky run. I'm starting to think that the addition of Anderson, the addition of Smith Rowe has really improved our team from last year. And I'm really pleased with how we looked like we're clicking in attack, and the defense looks really strong with Anderson now commanding at the back alongside Bassi. So really pleased with how the team is developing and how the forward players are linking up. So I'm really positive actually now. And, it's given me hope for the weekend. I thought the Forest game, and I looked at the calendar and I looked at their early season results. I was concerned that it was going to be a tricky away game for us. But after Saturday's performance, I just now feel a bit more confident because I can see the confidence in the team. And as you say, they're going to have a player missing, and I know we're going to get into it, but it just gives, the performance on Saturday, the run, 4 unbeaten, you just have to feel positive. And really look forward to talking about it today.
Yeah, well, let's get straight into it. Skibby, I'll throw to you first. Just, let's talk about the big news, I guess, that Morgan Gibbs-White, who is obviously Forest's probably their best player, he's their captain as well, and their manager Nuno is both unavailable for this game on the weekend. How big an impact do you think that's going to have on Forest? Admittedly, they've got a squad of about 80, so...
That's the thing, though. They've got a massive squad, but have they got a massive squad of quality? Not in my eyes. Morgan Gibbs-White quality, he's the star man. Like, he... makes everything happen. He's been a bit of a thorn in the side, if I'm honest. Every time we played against him, he just sort of seems to turn up and just basically bring them to that next level. But we've seen it before, when Mitrovic or that kind of quality player for us was unavailable. We really struggled to get things working, to get things playing in the way that we know that we can, and I think that's how it's going to feel for Forest. Is the real question for me, and I'm open to interpretation from you guys, but like, who's going to come in to replace him? Because I had a look at their squad, and like you say, they've got a vast amount. But you could bring in, Ward-Prowse at the moment has been playing in that kind of number 8 role. Did they push him up? Bring Ryan Yates in? I think he was on the bench at the weekend. But then you've got, I want to say, Jota Silva. Is an attacking sort of midfielder, but is he more of a luxury player? Is he not going to put in the shift? There's a real headache for them, for me, that, you're going to be able to replace Morgan Gibbs-White from about, I don't know, 30% to 40% of what he actually gives the team, but you can't do the whole thing. So you couldn't go for Jota Silva for his attacking intent, or Yates for his defensive work, and Ward-Prowse for the set pieces and things. But it's really difficult now for me as an outsider. I mean, you've probably got Forest fans shouting at me and saying, "You idiot, you don't know anything." But that's how I look at it. So, it's a real gap to fill. And I think it's a real blessing in disguise for Fulham, that, we can really take the game to them, because I don't care what anyone says, matches are won in the middle of the park. And to have a Gibbs-White size hole in that middle of the park is going to be really felt by Forest. And then you think about the manager. Nuno has come in, he's done a pretty good job at Forest, he's getting them playing, and to not have that figure at the sideline is a huge impact. I know that they probably get him on the phone, or they've wired up something that he can talk to the bench, but it's not the same. And we've seen that ourselves with Marco. He had a touchline ban every other week, it felt like, but in the last season. But they're going to feel it, and not to mention they've got the pressure of being one of the only teams that are unbeaten in the league. So for me, they've got a lot of unnecessary pressure. And I know that everyone's been complaining about the referees, but it was a second yellow for me. It was unnecessary. Force may have got a bit of the ball, but after absolutely cleaning out the man, to do that on a yellow, madness. And to be honest, I'm surprised a lot more of the fans haven't called him out on it rather than tried to blame the ref for that decision.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I agree. He's going to be a massive loss. Just looking at some of the stats that I found online, he is the leader in XA, so expected assists for Forest. He's got double what anyone else in the team has, and the other players who do have high XA are Callum Hudson-Odoi and Chris Wood, who are both strikers. So kind of expect that. He has the second highest XG behind Chris Wood. He's got the third most key passes. As per the Premier League website, their stats, he's the only player at Forest so far who's created big chances from the midfield. So he's, like you said, the match is won in the middle. And we've seen how important it is to have the middle of the park firing. When Lukic and Pereira and ESR aren't quite working right, it all sort of falls apart. And I think losing a player like Gibbs-White and not knowing who his direct replacement is as well is going to cause some issues for them. Like you said, it's going to have to be putting a square peg into a round hole for Forest, because they've got a big squad, but it's actually finding the right player to do that. And you're going to probably, like you said, maybe have to pull James Ward-Prowse into that position. Maybe someone like Awoniyi or Hudson-Odoi has to drop back deeper and take up that position as well. Dave, how are you feeling knowing that Gibbs-White's going to be out on the weekend? Do you think it's going to be make as big an impact as Skibby and I both said?
Yeah, I do. I think he's a top player and clearly their biggest threat. So and everything kind of goes through Gibbs-White for Forest. So I think it's a big blow for them. And like Skibby said, I'm not 100% sure how they're going to line up to replace him. They don't really have a natural number 10 replacement as far as I can see. So that's going to be really interesting. And it's an opportunity for us to take advantage of that on Saturday. I still have some concerns, that I think out wide they're quite strong. I think Callum Hudson-Odoi and Alanga have started the season really well. And I think Wood has, in the last kind of 12 months really has shown that he's still, a Premier League quality goal scorer. So they've got plenty of threats, and I presume they'll let us have a lot of the ball on Saturday and look to try and counter and use that effectively. So there's still danger there, but you can't get away from the fact that one of their best players is missing. I'm not as convinced the manager issue is as big a deal. I appreciate, that not having him there is not ideal, but don't know. I think that last year when Silva was missing, I think we won against Wolves at home with Silva on the touchline. So I don't necessarily think it makes a massive difference for an isolated game. I think for sure that Gibbs-White though is a blow, and one that gives us an opportunity.
Yeah, look, I I think it's hard to tell. I think logistically it causes a bit of a hassle. It really depends. I don't know who the Forest assistant manager is. It depends how much of an influence I think he has over the squad as well. I think when we had someone like Boa Morte as the assistant, it's probably a little bit better because he's closer with the squad and knows the guys very well. If our current assistant manager Goncalo Santos was taking charge of the game, I'd be slightly worried, to be honest, because he's only been with us for a few months, doesn't know the team that well, maybe doesn't have the same persona and presence that Marco has on the touchline. You see Marco getting up, and it must fire the players up seeing the manager on the touchline, getting yellow cards every week, basically. I think having that presence on the touchline does make a bit of a difference, even if it might not seem as much because they can't really impact the game apart from shouting at people. But I think it definitely all sort of leans in Fulham's favour this weekend, if not completely tipping it over for us.
Dangerously, right?
Dangerously, yeah, as always. If things are going well, it's even worse. Let's talk about Fulham's lineup or potential lineup for this game. There's a few players who are obviously knocking on the door, as we mentioned at the start. Do we expect to see any changes from Silva, knowing that he does like to keep it as it was after a win? Dave, I'll throw to you first.
Do I expect any changes? No. Would I like to see a change? Yes. I know Skibby knows where this is going. I'm going to offend him greatly now, but I think it's time to, give Berger a go in place of, actually in place of Lukic at the 6, and let Lukic move into Pereira's role in the 8. I feel it'll give us a bit more strength in the centre of midfield, particularly away from home. And I feel like they'll be doing that anyway for the City game. I can't imagine that won't be a consideration by Silva for the City game, which follows the Forest game this week. I'm, as you know, not been that impressed. I've been very impressed with Fulham's start to the season, but less impressed with Andreas's performances. I think clearly the set piece thing is, huge. And I take that on board. And I think that, there isn't a natural set piece taker in the squad other than Andreas. But behind that, the stats aren't particularly favourable. I was having a quick look before we came on, and pass completion rate for Andreas is 74%, bottom 16% percentile in the league. 2 tackles this season, 1 interception, bottom percentiles in the league. He's just not, for me, doing the job of a number 8. And I'm concerned that that's a little bit of a weak point in our team. So I'd like us to freshen up there, but I don't think we will. I think Marco will go with a winning side. So, yeah, over to you, Skippy, because I'm sure that's probably rubbed you up the wrong way.
I do really appreciate you coming in with percentiles, though, because that's going to make it very hard for Skibby to argue now.
Well, straight off the bat, Andreas made 3 tackles against Newcastle, so there we go.
Not according to the footy stats, though. It's
just saying. I'm just saying. Yeah. I you know what? I was listening to the pod yesterday on the train, and yeah, I was doing some stats myself, and yeah. How many tackles did Lukic make against Newcastle as your number 6?
Oh, I don't know that.
I bet Skibby does.
0. A big fat 0. So don't get me wrong. I love Lukic in the 6, and he reminds me of a quote which I remember hearing from Berbatov, which was his father was a centre back, but he could read the game so well he never had to make a tackle. And that's what I see in a Lukic number 6, is he reads the game really well. He'll pick up the foul. But he wasn't actually making any tackles, but he's doing the job well. And I think for me, and the Andreas sort of stats that we're seeing, so I do understand the 16th percentile for pass completion, and the only sort of slim argument I have against that is because he's trying some Hollywood progressive balls, which I don't think he should be. His decision making is pretty awful at the start of this season. It really is. But he is making those progressive passes. I think there was one really frustrating one at the weekend, which was he got the ball in the middle of the park, in between the halfway line and the area, and he tried to spray it out wide to Nelson almost like first time, like a drilled ball, And it was almost like you didn't need to do that. You could have recycled it. You could have done anything apart from what you actually did. But it's progressive. He's trying something. The problem I've got with Lukic coming into that number 8 role is if you look at the number of progressive passes he makes, it's pretty low. It's not fantastic. Judging by last season anyway, which I think we all agree that, when he came in, it never really worked with Polina, and he did struggle. And I think what we would miss if we do take out Pereira and put in Lukic into that number 8 is just that ability to break lines. And I do understand that there are very clear cases which everyone seems to remember the bad things but not so much the good things. No one really cares about the ball that he did over the top to Smith Rowe for Jimenez's goal for West Ham, but they do remember that, in a 2-on-1 against Harry Maguire, and Iwobi completely smashed it straight at Maguire. Understand that. But I do think that losing that progressive sort of passing from Andreas would be a big hindrance that we would actually miss, that people probably don't actually notice, because Lukic would pick up the ball in the number 8 position and probably look to go sideways or backwards all the time, and that could hinder us a little bit. But that's just my kind of opinion and that feeling on that. But in terms of the actual question at hand, which was about the starting 11, I don't think I can see any changes. We completely took the game to Newcastle. No need to make any changes. I think until we're in a position where Marco has that feeling that Lukic can be that number 8 for us and that progressive number 8 that we need, then potentially Andreas is probably going to be the first name on the chopping block, as it were, to sort of come out to make room for Berger. But it's going to be an interesting one, and to be honest, there's probably some more conversations going on at Motspur Park which we have no idea about. But I can't see Berger coming in for 20 odd million, sold this dream that you are going to be the number 6, and to be on the bench coming into the 5th game in the league. So it's a matter of time, but it's going to be an interesting one of which direction it goes. I mean, to be honest, it would not surprise me if we started to probably see Berger come in to be that number 8, because Lukic is in just such a way that he can't be moved, but I don't think you'll get the same out of Lukic by moving him into that number 8 position. So potentially, if Berger can be that progressive passer that we need, which I think he was at Burnley, then potentially we've now had to sort of think our strategy that, we brought him in to be the number 6, but it just doesn't fit the bill. And Lukic is playing so well that in a different way that we didn't expect, that, it's a different problem to have. But no, for me, I think it's going to be the same 11. I do think that, the performances will start to really be under scrutiny now, that there are people banging on the door waiting to come in. So you better bring your A game. But for this weekend, I can't see any changes, no.
To jump back slightly though, as you said, for the Man City game, it is likely that we will see changes, and one of those changes is likely to be, well, not likely, but possibly Pereira out for Berger in, just to add a bit more defensive stability and
yeah,
maybe get ready for Man City. And so, in a way, do you feel like this is a good opportunity to prepare for Man City? Forest are a counter-attacking team. Maybe we want to be a little bit more defensively sound to try and shut that down and have Berger and Lukic playing together a little bit deeper? Or do you think it's more likely that Marco's just going to go for the win and stick with what he knows?
It'd be silly not to. In a position where they haven't got the attacking flair of Gibbs White, who's going to basically pull the strings, it would be very silly of us to sit back and think, why not take the game to them? I think that's the point I'm making. I think we make that decision in a game where Man City are going to have a lot of the ball. They're going to possession base, unlock doors, where Forest, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the stats of their last couple of games, but I think they only got the red card against Brighton right at the death, and they only had 29% possession. So they are a team who love to give you the ball, love to let you do what you want with it, and then try and break you on the counter. But I don't think gearing up for Man City against a team like Forest is going to be the right strategy. I know they're going to be working on that at the training ground. They're probably going to have a game plan of, like you say, bringing in Lukic and Berger, who will sit deeper, soak up pressure, really pack out the midfield, and also that physicality piece. But I think for us, it would be silly to not try and take the game to Forest and put them to bed when we've got that opportunity in the middle of the park where we can come off superior.
Dave?
Yeah, no, I don't. I think it's Forest are a very different team to Man City. As Skibby says, Forest will let us have the ball and look to counter attack, whereas Man City will have all of the ball and will be the counter attacking side a week later. But I think the flip side is I just like to see that partnership get an opportunity ahead of that Man City game to see. And as Skibby made a really good point, perhaps it's not Lukic, perhaps it's Berger that can be the one that's a bit more progressive. Or perhaps even they can take it in turns. That would perhaps the partnership could and the attributes that they have, one could cover the other. So I'd quite like to see that partnership. As I said, I'm not expecting changes. It's just I'd like to see that partnership get an opportunity before it's thrown into the deep end against Man City.
Yep, I think that's fair. Guys, I'll throw for a question here, and it's one that we have discussed pretty much before every game. Raul Jimenez and Rodrigo Muniz, do we think Jimenez now has solidified himself, at least for an extended period, as Fulham's starting striker?
Yes, I think so. I think 2 goals in his last 2 home games, and actually a really good performance on Saturday, particularly first half. I don't think he got a lot of the ball in the second, but particularly first half, I thought he was really good. And he's the man scoring the goals, so he gets the number 9 shirt for me for now. And Munoz will get another opportunity as the season goes on. He definitely looks like a man carrying a lot of weight on his shoulders. He wasn't his usual self off the bench, I didn't think, on Saturday. I think he threw his weight around, which was positive, and had a good crack at goal, a shot that just went over the bar. But generally, his work rate just looked a little bit off for me, and he just looked like a man a little bit low in confidence. So I don't think there'd be many Fulham fans that would push for a Muniz start on Saturday. I think Raul's got to be given the opportunity while he's in form.
Skibby? Yeah, no, absolutely, completely agree with Dave. I think I even saw a stat. I think it was Fulham Fan News. Was it he scored Jimenez has scored 8 times in 9 starts, in 9 Premier League starts or something ridiculous, which I didn't realise, but I do forget that he went through a bit of a purple patch scoring goals before he got injured, and then Muniz had to come in and then hit his own purple patch. So it's I mean, the stats are there that he is a decent striker if he starts, and potentially not that kind of player that comes off the bench and can make an impact. It is a shame, as Dave said, that Muniz, he had a few touches, but I love the fact that he absolutely bundled Burn over after 10 seconds, let him know you're there early. But what I do like about Muniz though is I think there was even a clip that you saw at the weekend, but I remember seeing it because the subs warm up right in front of me. But after Smith Rowe scored, Muniz was cheering like a fan that we scored a goal, and it just goes to show that he's a real team player, not other big-headed Premier League strikers would be like, oh, I should have been on there to score that, blah blah blah. But he was celebrating each goal with like a fan, and that just really goes to show how happy he is to be part of the squad rather than being an individual, which I like about him. But Raul, he's showing his quality. He's had to shake off some rustiness this season. I think we were probably quite harsh that he wasn't, I forget that he's probably 32, 33, and he's not a spring chicken, so we don't expect him to run around like a headless chicken like Muniz does. But the quality's there. I mean, that goal against Newcastle, the touch, the turn, the finish, everything about it just oozed class. And to have someone like that in your Arsenal is pretty rare, I would say. I mean, I reckon there's quite a few Premier League teams that would love a sort of a striker like that. So for me, if he keeps scoring, you just got to keep playing him until he gives you a reason not to. But again, it goes back to the thing I said earlier, which is there's a lot of quality in this squad. So if you're not pulling your weight, or the performances aren't coming, then there's going to be someone who can take your place. So to have that level of competitiveness is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, he's proving himself to be a very good striker. Like, he's scoring good goal. That goal on the weekend, he passes the ball out to Adama in the first place, who manages to get the ball to him. They've got a very good um, ability to link up, which obviously comes over from their time at Wolves together as well. He gets into just a little pocket of space, but to be able to chest the ball down and shoot on the swivel like that was really impressive, and to get so much power that Pope didn't even move. It was a really good finish, and I'm liking what I'm seeing from Jimenez. We've given him a lot of stick, let's be honest, over the last sort of 18 months since he first signed for Fulham, because he's on a very big contract and maybe wasn't the sort of star striker we were hoping for. But when you actually look at his stats and break it down, he's done a very good job for Fulham over a decent period of time. So I think, like you've both said, he holds this position for a while. I hope Muniz doesn't let it affect him too much, because we know he is a confidence player and he'd like to be out on the park scoring goals. But I think, like you've both said as well, the morale in the squad is really good at the moment. And I think it was Reece Nelson, or it might have been Smith Rowe post game on the weekend, said, you know, the guys are really enjoying their time here. Everyone gets along really well. It's like a really good family, and you can see that on the pitch, because these new players you've joined are already, a massive part of the squad, and seem to be fitting in really well. And there's no bad eggs, and there's no one sort of sitting on the outer. It's really positive at the moment, which turns into positive results as well. Um, Let's take a quick look at recent form. Fulham's actually, this is quite nice to look at for once. No red, no losses in our last 5 games, not including Preston, but wins against Birmingham and Newcastle, 1-1 draws against Ipswich, West Ham, and Preston. A quick look at Forest's recent form, also unbeaten as well in the last 5. Wins against Southampton and Liverpool, both 1-0, and then draws with Newcastle, Wolves, and Brighton, all in the league. And obviously that draw against Brighton on the weekend. Dave, looking at the results for Forest, they've played Southampton, Newcastle, Wolves, Liverpool, and Brighton. Do we feel like maybe they haven't been fully tested yet this season, and this is a chance for Fulham to maybe spring a bit of a surprise on them?
Well, I don't think there's many bigger tests than Liverpool, and they managed to get a result in that game, which was quite remarkable, really, particularly given how Liverpool started the season. But look, I think what I'm quite impressed with Forest is they're actually not conceding that many at the moment either. I mean, I know they conceded 2 at the weekend, but Brighton's a tricky place to go. They seem to have got things together at the back, and that's helping them, get through games. I think they've got threatening players in attack, as we've spoken about earlier on the wings, and they're a threat. I'd still say, even with Gibbs White out, I think neutrals would probably make them ever so slightly favourites, just because they're at home on Saturday. But it does feel like a game where any result is possible, and we just need to, as always, take our opportunities when we get our periods on top. And I think that'll be the difference, really. I think we're going to get chances. And if we can take them and obviously restrict them, then there's an opportunity here. So look, their run can't go on forever. It's been great, and I do think that they're a better side than a lot of people gave them credit for, but their run can't go on forever. And the way we're playing at the moment, the way the 3 behind Raul are playing at the moment, they're going to cause problems for anyone. So I'm really excited to see how they do on Saturday.
Dave, you mentioned that, or Dave or Skibby, we talked about the fact that Forest are dangerous out wide, but Tete and Robinson, probably 2 of our best players so far this season. Forest aren't a high-scoring team. If you look at their recent games, 1-0, 1-1, 1-1, 1-0, 2-2 on the weekend against Brighton, but one of those was a penalty. Do you feel like being able to shut down the wings through Tete and Robinson is actually going to put us in an even better position here?
Oh, for sure. I mean, the only worry I would have is the performance that Kenny put in last season against Forest away, if you recall, wasn't particularly strong. But I think it's a different Kenny Tete this season. I think he's back to his absolute best, and arguably, in the shout for man of the match on Saturday. So I think it's a different Kenny Tete, and then you're right, we are well equipped in those areas to, I think, play against any team in the league out wide. But, they're going to be trying to counter-attack quickly. And, they'll find gaps if we've got too many players committed forward. So, look, you're right. We are strong in those departments. We might need the wingers to also help, when they have their periods on top. But, it's just something we need to be aware of. It's going to be a test.
Yeah. Skibby, it's weird going into this game. I don't fear Forest. Wait for that one to be clipped by all the Forest fans for next week. But genuinely, looking at their squad, there's no one in there apart from Gibbs White who really worries me overly. I feel like we can handle players like Chris Wood and the rest of the danger players at Forest. Do you feel similarly, or do you see potential cracks that they can exploit on the weekend?
I don't see cracks that they can exploit. The only thing that does concern me a little bit is if you look at the stats of Forest's previous game, well, the last 2 games is the one I looked at, but Forest are very clinical. So they scored 2 against Brighton, 1 being a penalty, but they only had, I think, 3 shots on target. And then Liverpool, again, they only had, I think, 3 shots all game, and they managed to put 1 away. So they're finding the back of the net on, I guess, what is it, sort of a 30 to 35% return, which is pretty impressive. So I think if they're able to get a chance, they might take it. And there's certain things which, concern me a little bit is, what I've seen recently of the way that Fulham defend is we're trying to be very, very aggressive. We're trying to beat them to the punch. And that's kind of how we conceded against Newcastle. I think Anderson stepped in, missed the ball and the man. Therefore, they got a ball out wide and suddenly we're all out of shape. So it's the risk versus reward, right? Bassey and Anderson are really aggressive, get the ball, and I think even Bassey had a great game against Newcastle where he would step up in front of the striker, and before you know it, he's taken about 2 or 3 players out of the game, and he's taken the ball up the pitch and carrying it for us. So I think that's the minor concern I have, and I think, sort of talking about Tete, he was my man of the match for sure. The way that he shut down Harvey Barnes, they swapped wings with Gordon, and then he shut down Gordon. Gordon didn't even want it in the first half. It was really surprising, but it just showed how well Tete was playing. And I think Hudson-Odoi is probably going to have a good game. Chelsea boy, heavily linked to us before he moved to Forest. It's just written in the stars, isn't it? So we need Tete to be, on a really top of his form against Hudson-Odoi. But I think that's the only sort of minor thing I'd say is just the aggressiveness that we are and how clinical they can be is something that they could catch us on.
Absolutely. Dave, I'll throw to you. Give us your prediction for the weekend.
I'm going to sit on the fence and go with a score draw. I'm going to go 2-2.
2-2. Skibby?
2-0 Forest, because last time I predicted us a loss, we won really comfortably. So 2-0 Forest.
I'll go somewhere in the middle with a 2-1 Fulham win this weekend. I feel like we're scoring goals, and I think you win games if you score goals. A quick look at the league table as it stands before the weekend. So Forest currently sitting in 8th, Fulham in 9th. Just 1 point separating us, same goal difference. A win this weekend will take us to 11 points, which is currently 4th place. Expect that to change over the weekend, but I would say that if we do win, we'll definitely leapfrog Forest, but it would see us probably move up to 7th, maybe even 6th if results go our way. So fingers crossed for a good result this weekend and seeing us moving up the table nicely. Guys, before we do finish up today, I want to go over some of the latest news from the Fulham women's team. A 13-0 victory on the weekend against Epsom and Ewell Football Club in the second qualifying round. 4 goals for Sasha Adamson, 5 for Sophie Manzi, 2 for Georgia Heisman, 1 for Maddie Parsonson, and 1 for Liv Morgan. A really good result that sees Fulham through to the third qualifying round, which will be played against Maidenhead United on the 13th of October at Motspur Park. Good to see the team progressing in the Cup. Good also to see a couple of players from the youth teams getting on the pitch in the FA Cup. A really good chance to rotate the players and get some more minutes in the legs. Guys, the Fulham women have been absolutely flying this season. I think they've scored close to 40 goals now across the first 4 or 5 games of the season. Have only conceded the 1. Really promising signs moving forward, and we're hoping that they continue this. Haven't really been tested yet this season, but I do expect that there'll be some tough games coming up over the next few weeks. So best of luck to Fulham Women's in the league and in the FA Cup as well. Hopefully we get a nice cup run this year. Maidenhead United, decent side. It will be a tough game for Fulham, but being at home will definitely make a big difference. Guys, was there anything else that you guys wanted to cover off on this pod?
Only thing I wanted to mention was
so far.
only thing I was going to say was 4 goals in the second half there from the girls. So that's not good enough. They need to do better going forward.
rough, Skibby. Dave,
hey, they've set a certain standard. They got to keep going that standard.
still hit double figures at least. Dave?
No, just as I said, it's been you now when you look back on it, the 4 points we've taken off West Ham and Newcastle, the fact that we're now in the top half of the table and looking up, it's a real positive place. And I'm really gutted I'm not going to the game on Saturday now, and I think it's going to be a good away day, and we're a very competitive side, so it's a good time to be a fan, isn't it? And I'm sure everyone's feeling really comfortable with where we are right now.
Yeah,
and no repeat of last season. Was it 3-0 after 20 minutes or something? Oh,
yeah,
horrendous.
That was when Marco actually made some early subs last season.
Yeah.
Hopefully we've learned from the error of our ways last time around, and we get a decent result this year. Like everyone said so far, and I think that's the reason we've managed to wrap this one up quite quickly, is things are actually starting to click and going well. And I think we can see the path forward for Fulham here. We can see the pathway for some of those players to get into the starting 11. We can see the way that Marco's system is starting to bed in with these new signings as well. And look, it's exciting. I'm kind of looking forward to the Man City game in a way in a couple of weeks' time, because I think the way we're playing at the moment and the sort of stability that we've got means that we might actually give them a half decent game. I think we've always played pretty well against City, apart from a couple of games here and there, but we have the potential to actually get a bit of a surprise result, maybe a draw, maybe even a win, who knows? But things are starting to look really positive, which is really good for us at the moment. So, Dave, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate the work you've done over the last couple of weeks, taking care of the pod as well.
Yeah, no problem at all. It was a pleasure. But as I said, I'm sure the listeners were getting sick of me. So and they'll be delighted to have you back, Jack. So it's great to see you. And I'm just, as I say, really excited for the weekend.
Cheers, Dave. Watch our numbers take a dive now that I'm back and everyone's calling out saying, bring back Dave. Skibby, thanks for joining this weekend, mate.
No worries, thanks for having me. And looking forward to the game, and hopefully we can keep the positivity in the pod. I don't want a negative one and we're all at each other's throats.
No,
Or
just
maybe
keep
we
Sam
do.
off the pod for a while and it will be fine. No, I agree. It's actually nice to be able to sit down and have a chat and not worry too much about over negativity. And I think even Fulham Twitter is actually quite positive at the moment, which is a weird change. You're not seeing all the whinging constantly. It's quite refreshing. Although it does make Twitter quite boring because there's no one whinging about stuff anymore. So, guys, thank you again. Thank you to everyone who's joined on the live stream. Really appreciate the support. Please do continue to like and share the podcast with other Fulham fans so that we're found by everyone. Get on the Discord, get on the website. rank us or rate us rather on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It does make a difference if you can. And as always, come on, you Whites.